How's everybody doing? Hope you're doing well. Welcome to week 4. Hope the first 3 weeks have been treating you well. Hope you are enjoying these lectures, the content in the book, everything that you've read from your classmates, discussion board, even the eye exercise. I know that can be very unnerving. I remember the first time I did that, and I'll never forget it. But it's one of those things that I think can be very impactful depending on the right circumstance. That's why I'm trying to think if I use it anytime outside of marriage, and I don't think I ever have. Um, at least to date, I have not used it outside of marriage. And so, do I use that actually with clients myself, where I actually look? No, I do not do that. I do not do that. Would it be appropriate? I couldn't see how it could be. But again, God could always correct me if there's ever an opportunity in that. And I think that's why it's so beneficial and beautiful for us to stay connected and being in attunement to God, just as Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father do. And again, that's what it is that we need to do as clinicians, as counselors, as pastors, is to stay in attunement to who God is and what it is that He's doing in the session so that we actually don't do something that's going to inhibit the function and the flow of what needs to happen in that session. Again, for us as a counselor, we want to cultivate an atmosphere where God is invited to the point where our counsel is directing them to the counselor. And as long as we're doing that, then we are doing our job. And if we're not, then we are actually distracting. We are causing a disturbance to the point where the individual may not actually get what they need, which is really that ultimate connection, reestablishing God as source, just as we understand through Genesis 3. That's what in essence was lost. So this week you're going to read chapters 7 and 8. I'm going to talk a little bit about chapter 7. May jump back and forth a little bit, but we have assignment 2. Talk a little bit about that. This assignment is going to be very similar to the first assignment, except for instead of the eye exercise, it's going to be a validational exercise. This is something that I use constantly within everybody that I interact with. I feel like the dynamic of reestablishing self through integration, body, soul, spirit, 3 in 1, as you can read what they're in the early formations of Genesis. And so the dynamic of what Genesis 3 did was create a disintegration to the dynamic of breaking those 3 elements apart, if I can say elements, to the extent of what the cross actually reestablishes, so that the point of us being put back in that original formation and or reflection and or imagery. So in that, the dynamic is if the body is a reflective measurement, then the dynamic of what it feels, it needs the mind to validate. The mind is powerful, thus the soul, and when the body feels, the body can't lie to itself. The body cannot lie to itself, but it cannot validate itself either. It needs the mind to do this, and we do this really well physically. If I get a cut on my hand, I'll go put a Band-Aid on it. That's validational. If I am hanging a picture and accidentally miss and hit my finger, and I go put ice on it, that's validational. But emotionally, the dynamic is how we can take our mind and actually invalidate our body, which is will always be the byproduct of anger, just as we understand with the story of Cain. The dynamic is making sure that the kingdom divided against itself will fall, is when these 2 kingdoms, if I can say it like that, are integrated in one. Mind, body. The body feels, it needs a mind to interpret. And so the dynamic in how we can help them continue to move forward by assimilating God into the picture so integration can take place. I'm probably sure we've talked about that to some degree. And if we haven't, then I kind of ran through that too a little quickly, and let me know if we have not. Teach multiple classes, and so I can't remember if I went into that to the in depth that I would like for us to. But actionary skills, the dynamics of interpretation, these are typically thought of as using with in primary the highest functioning of clients. Usually the book, not usually, the book coordinates the individuals in kind of a 3-tiered levels. Level 1 being intense, 2 being less intense, and then 3 being that where they're at a place almost of discharge. And so the dynamic of individuals, we love getting individuals when they come in just for enrichment. Hey Brady, life is good, everything's going well. However, in the process of all this, I I feel like something's off, right? And so in that, okay, here's the caveat is, as an insurance company, this is where it gets tricky, because if you're taking insurance, how do you help that individual get that session paid for? Can you? If there's not an accident, if there is not a mental health diagnosis in that session, what do you do? And this is an area, as y'all get to start thinking about these things, how people can commit insurance fraud by thinking, well, I want to do something for this individual because they can't afford it, but they don't actually have a diagnosis to the extent of what they need. And so they're coming in for enrichment, but the insurance company won't actually pay for this. So therefore, I'm actually going to be the kind, Christian oriented individual. So I'm going to help create that so that this will actually get paid for. That's tough. Why? Because even though that may be your motivation and you want to do that, now that is insurance fraud. So be very, very careful of that. And that's why a lot of times people are like, Brady, I don't even want to do insurance. And it took me a while for myself to actually get assimilated within the insurance component. But it can be a benefit depending on if that's something you want to do. Well, Brady, does this have anything to do with advanced action skills? Well, we're going to get there. But within the all-inclusivity of us talking through all the different actions of counseling so that you're aware of some of these things, you need to be aware of the insurance component. Well, I want to just hire somebody to handle all that. Fantastic. If you can, go for it. Well, I'm going to be a pastor and we really don't deal with insurance. You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you're going in the mental health arena, then the dynamic is insurance. Because when someone calls me, the very first question that they ask is, pre-COVID was, do you take insurance? Post-COVID is, do you have, are you taking new patients? Are you taking new clients? And then after I say yes, then they ask, do you take insurance? Because from the standpoint of, even though I say I do take insurance, oh, hey, you take my insurance, great. So therefore, it's already a slam dunk deal. And the answer is no. Why? Because I haven't been able to assess to see, hey, do they have a mental health diagnosis to the point where the insurance company will actually pay for the session. So when we think about getting back to the content of this this class, this chapter, when we think about the dynamic of interpretation, we think of connecting experience, thought, feeling, and behavior. You know, when you think about the idea, sometimes what I always like to do, sometimes always, you know, catch me saying these things that contradict itself, and I apologize. What I typically like to do is help ask questions in a way that they can make their own interpretation. And we see this within Jesus when he's asking a question multiple times. Hey, Peter, do you love me? Hey, Peter, do you love me? Hey, Peter, do you love me? Well, Brady, he's doing that from a different complexity. Yes, he is, but he's also using a counseling skill that we as counselors can actually utilize. Why? To help them create interpretation to what they're saying so they can hear it multiple times. Why? So that it's finally like a, and we see this within Peter when he says, you know that I do. You know that I do. Oh, it pains me, but you know all things. Through that dynamic of Jesus asking a question multiple times, he was able to catch the disconnect. And as a result of that, take ownership. And we see the benefit of Peter's life moving forward. So from that standpoint of how we use interpretation, now typically when you think about asking questions, you don't think about it through the formation of asking questions, but again, it's about connection, it's about awareness and or interpretation. So sometimes if I've asked a couple times, hey, can you, one more time, can you repeat that? Well, my brother and okay, one more time. I know, yeah, my point is not to create any frustrations. I just want to make sure I'm connecting with you. I want to make sure I'm hearing this accurately. Okay. Okay. Did you hear that? No, I didn't hear that. Okay. So then what I heard was this. Tell me if this connects with you. Tell me if this. And so as a result of that, what I'm doing is I'm helping bridge a gap between what they said and the dynamic of disconnect. Why? So that there can be interpretation through awareness. So now as a result of that, they can assimilate their will into the process and use that to determine how they want to move forward, if they want to move forward. Themes. Why did I respond that way? We look for themes, this dynamic of patterns, themes, all these different things. Like if you go into play therapy, one of the biggest things that they look is for our thematics. They're looking for themes. As you're playing, oh look, the daddy is constantly doing the dishes. Okay. Oh, you know what? The daddy pushed the kid through the door. What you're doing is you're creating not only interpretations based upon what you see, but also the themes of that, right? What is the theme, and how do you associate that into counseling to the point of creating what? Awareness. The God that we serve is a God of awareness. Why? The dynamic of what we're unaware of, the unconscious and even subconscious, to the point of bringing that to a conscious awareness. Why? For the opportunity of ownership, for the opportunity of confession, for the opportunity for us to be able to take the next step. And we see this within Cain. Brady used that illustration a lot. Absolutely. Why? Because it's one of the very first orientations right out of the garden where we see conflict. And from the standpoint of why I believe anger is so vital is because this was one of the first, if not the first, emotion representational outside of the garden, right? And what does God do? Ask Cain a question in hopes that Cain would take ownership of that to be able to determine moving forward. And he did that through creating interpretation by asking a question. Why are you so angry? Didn't say he couldn't or shouldn't, but why? Oh, it's because God was unaware. No, that's not the case at all, because that discorrelates from the very character and nature of who God is, and he's always aware, all knowing, right? So from that standpoint, he was creating the opportunity of asking a question, being able to get Cain into awareness. So as our role as clinicians, as pastors, when you see it and the light hits, God drops the revelation in you to the extent you know what's going on. Do you deliver that? And the answer is yes. But the bigger question is how. Do you say, oh, you know what? It's because of this X, Y, and Z? Because again, if you do that, they can miss that. So the opportunity of being able to ask questions are vital. And one of the things that I saw within Blackboard discussion was, for a few of y'all said, I struggle based upon your rating system, for the second Blackboard post of asking questions. Okay, here's an area that we can get stronger in. So when I say the idea of when you rated yourself, and y'all did a fantastic job assessing yourself, that is one of the more difficult things to do. Why? Because the idea of looking at yourself subjectively and asking yourself objectively, what do I do well? What are the areas that I need to grow in? And so one of the things I want to lay to rest is the idea of how we define strength. How we define strength. It is not or let me go back, and I was fixing to do the very thing that I just got there asking you, ladies and gentlemen, not to do. Is strength defined as the absence of weakness? And if it is, then as a result of that, we will assess strength based upon that very premise. But if we see strength as the opportunity of taking a step, as the opportunity of recognizing an awareness, then what we can do next with that is actually strength. Why? Because it's equating God into the picture, just as Cain, just as Peter, just as all these different illustrations throughout Scripture. And what it does is it invites who God is, the strength, in his complexity into what it is that we're experiencing. What is that? That is strength. Strength is recognizing, oh, here's an area of vulnerability. Here's an area where I need to get stronger. Here's an area that I need more enrichment. That is strength, by creating recognition and or awareness to invite who God is into that very moment. That's strength. That's strength. But if I anticipate that strength is the absence of weakness, then as a result of that, the definition in itself could actually cause us further hindrances. So getting back to the content of chapter 7, when we talk about dreams can be important. People come in and say, Brady, I had this dream and it was really, really interesting. We a lot of times either put a lot of emphasis on dreams or we discount dreams. Hey, I had some bad pizza, but man, I was thinking about my mother-in-law and the situation, and man, I don't understand what's going on. But you know what, Brady? I just kind of just chalked it off to the idea that nothing. It's really not anything to put any attention in. Really. Tell me about your relationship with your mother-in-law. Oh, it's toxic. Okay. Can you unpack that a little bit more? Would that be okay? Tell me about y'all's last interaction. Tell me about y'all's first interaction. Where have y'all always, has a relationship always been toxic? Has it been something that has evolved over time? Talk to me a little bit about that. Is this okay? Yeah. Okay. Why? Because again, if we repress the areas of cognition, awareness to the extent that we don't want to deal or come to some type of resolution about the areas of woundedness, then the kindest thing that God can do and will do is consciously bring it up to us through what? Through our dreams. Why? So that the conscious can actually go to sleep and the or the unconscious can roam wild, if I can say it like that, to the extent of, man. So a lot of times I tell people, take attention to your dreams. Pay attention to what they are, and as a result of that, ask God. Because if it is to the point where it was bad pizza, if I can say it, or nothing of significance, then He gets to determine that. But if I determine that, then as a result of that, I can actually cause myself further hindrances in an area that God actually wants to bring healing to. Oh God, had a dream about this. Did you ask God about it? Well, no. Why would I? Well, here's what I know about dreams. Well, do you interpret dreams? Well, I don't really feel like that's a gifting of mine, but why don't you tell me what it is and we can talk through it? Maybe there will be some revelation. I don't know. It's usually kind of my response, Can God give interpretations of dreams? Absolutely. Can He show that with people? Sure. Is He going to do that with me right now? I don't know. So if you feel comfortable, why don't you share the dream with me and then let's talk about it and see what God would do. But here's what I know about dreams. That if there's something that God wants to bring to our awareness, but for whatever reason, I won't own that awareness, then when the conscious brain goes to sleep, the unconscious brain is awake and alive as always, and God will deposit things into that to the point when we wake up, we're like, wow. Freud actually put a lot of significance into dream interpretation. And again, a lot of his premise was always sexual in nature. And again, if you go back to a lot of the dynamics of early chapters of like Genesis 6 and 9 and places like that, we can see potentially that there could be a correlation, but I'm going to leave that up to you. But a lot of times Freud actually gets the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater. Why? Because of the dynamic of some of the things of how we assess Freud. Freud is actually one of my favorites. Why? Because I see his message and Jesus' message a lot in correlation, not from the sexual side of things, but the dynamic of bringing the unconscious to the conscious. Right? From that correlation, because I believe God is a God of awareness and He wants to bring these very things into focus. And I believe, based upon Stanford Medical, that 95% of what we do actually happens from a subconscious orientation, therefore belief. And if we can address that, then we can actually shift and a lot of the complexities of that. So the dynamic of how Freud actually put emphasis on dreams. Why? From the standpoint of how he viewed the conscious, the subconscious, or what he would call the preconscious, and the unconscious. Christian view, of course, we get Joseph and the dynamic of how God would speak through him, and the Nebuchadnezzar dreams and things of that nature. And so, in that, can God speak through dreams? Absolutely. Can God give you interpretation based upon dreams in people's sessions? Sure. How do you go about doing that? How do you go about, and maybe that's a giftedness within you. If so, let me know. Teach me. That would be awesome. But in this, it's the dynamic of it can be considered as controversial when I don't really believe that it's intended to be controversial. We all dream. Sometimes we remember them. Sometimes we don't. Not going into all that. The intro to psychology class, if you had to take it, will go into the specifics of why and how much and all those different categorizations. But again, if there is a dream, what does it look like to unpack it by saying, God, is there something to that? That's what I do. When I wake up and I remember a dream, I ask God, is there anything that you're saying to me through that? And when someone's telling me their dream, I always ask God, do you have something for me to know to be able to share? That's it. That's it. You may have a little bit more. You may have a gifting in that, and so that's awesome. That's awesome. Poems and stories. The creative element of sessions can be amazing. My time in the church, I was one of the pioneers of helping create an internal deliverance style ministry within one of the bigger churches in the DFW area. And with that, it was us learning and training other individuals how to see kids and how to help them hear God and remove any obstacles from, all those complexities. And so a lot of times I would get parents that would come in my office and they would be asking me to interact with a child that was really young. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh Lord, I don't know how to help them, but I want to be able to minister to them however you would lead me. And a lot of times the complexities, and again, we'll get into some of the expressive arts, I'm just kind of laying the foundation. I would say, hey, mom, want to be able to pray over you and your little boy or your little girl. How about we do this? How about mom, you and I talk, and while we're talking, hey, little Johnny, are you good if I hand you this piece of paper and I want you to just draw whatever's in your heart. I want you to draw whatever, and as a result of that, just draw for as long as you like. Here's some markers, here's some pens, here. Let me make some room for you, and um, you know, I'm going to talk with mom. And so I talk with mom about just the complexities of what's going on and things of that nature and how they can cultivate an atmosphere of healing in their homes and things that they could be on the lookout and those type of things like that. And at the end of it, little Johnny would be done drawing his picture. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, are you done? Yeah. Oh man, wow, look at that. Can you turn it around? Can you show that to mommy? Wow. Mom, does that speak to you? Sometimes she'll start crying. Sometimes, no, I don't have a clue. Okay, that's fine, man. Johnny, that looks awesome. Hey, can you tell me what is this? I think I have a good idea, I mean, but I want to hear it from you. I want to hear from you, so I make sure that I don't miss anything that you're saying through this. And the expressive orientation a lot of times would actually tell us through their drawings of something that's going on. Okay, okay. And as we're asking, God, would you give me eyes to see and ears to hear what it is that Johnny is speaking through this drawing that I don't have the understanding to, but you do. And so when we think about poems and stories, and the expressive arts, to be able to help move people past their defensive orientations, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, we're helping them tap into that right brain element so that the dynamic is when people are traumatized, when people are hurt, the right brain goes hyperactive, left brain goes hyperdormant. So the standpoint of getting people to convey from a logic spatial standpoint sometimes can actually cause hurt and even further wounding because they may not even know where they are because of that hyperdormant orientation from a left brain hemisphere. So in that, utilizing creative elements can actually be helpful. Hey, let's draw a picture. Hey, tell me a story. Hey, tell me a story about life and your journey. I love getting to hear stories. I used to say early on, one of the greatest things I get to do in life is I get to listen to people's stories. And we all have a story. We're all on a journey. And so today, what I'd love to get to hear is your story. Would you tell me a little bit about your story? And so they are taking me on a ride and I'm looking for themes. I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for correlations of disconnection from God as source and reconnection to them as source that's causing them pain. And all the other complexities that, okay, so through that story, thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and transparent. Wow, that is power and strength personified. So thank you so much for being able to share that. So in that, did you catch anything that you may have not caught the last time you shared that story? Well, now that you mentioned it, yeah, X, Y, and Z. Okay. Okay. Or no, I didn't really. Okay, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Here's kind of what I heard. And so I want you to give me a little pushback, if you will. But I'm interested. When you said this, my first thought was that. Does that do anything for you? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes even when they push back and say no, it'll be like, Peter, no, oh my goodness, yes. So if they're very poetic, hey, how does it look like being able to walk through a linear process, just as we see the Father walk Jesus through, aware, declare, invite, express? That expression, how do I get whatever it is that's intending to stay in me out. The body is beautiful in the way that God created it, because again, the things that were never oriented to stay in us, God has created the mechanisms to get them out. Emotions are one of the only, if there are not more, I'm not, those are things that we're continuing to research. But emotions are one of the things that we give power to stay within us, and they impact us significantly. So the dynamic is, after we become aware and declare and invite, then the opportunity is, how do I transact and get whatever emotion, if that's anger, if that's whatever that may be, how do I get it out? And poetry can be a beautiful way. Poetry can actually reveal to you as a clinician what the individual's going through. Hey, can we write a poem? I'm just curious. Hey, write a poem. For those of y'all that have taken the children and adolescents class, one of the things that we teach on is song choices. Hey, what would it look like as we're getting to know each other? Man, write down 25 of your favorite songs. And then your favorite song, can we listen together? Would that be okay? Or would you sing it for me? Or would you just walk me through that? Okay, well, why does that correlate with you? And through the lyrics, they're connecting with, and the lyrics are actually communicating what's going on inside them, just as a poem can. So a poem can be a precursor telling you what's going on, or it can be a postcursor from the standpoint of how to express and get things out. So expressive arts, kind of get back into that, it moves past defense mechanisms. And defense mechanisms are intended, again, going back to the Freudian type work, that's kind of where we get this terminology, defense mechanism. And again, we understand that God is the defender and wants to defend if we will allow him to defend. But if we can't or won't, then we will erect ourselves in that very position to defend ourselves. Why? Because we always will need defense. And that is a legitimate need, and the enemy wants us to stand in that place to inhibit God from defending us so that we become defenders. Us trying to be our own gods, if we can say it that way. But that seems a little far-fetched. So again, we'll kind of pull it back a little bit and continue to stand in the area of needing defense and trying to defend ourselves. Right? This defense mechanism. And when we experience pain, hurt, whatever it may be, the mind actually tries to create a defense mechanism to try to project us into the future and or fixate us in the past. Why? Because the idea of pain we want to dissipate towards. We don't want any part of it. We want to move past it as quickly as we can. And what we see within Jesus as he leaned into it. We see the thresholds that stand in front of us, like I've talked in the past, that stand in front of us, it's about trying to get through them, not around them because we can't, not over them because we can't, but either through them or we have to revert back to old ways, which will cause even further pain. But the dynamic is, even though I'll walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the dynamic of the children of the Red Sea, walking through it, right? The dynamic is walking through. So the idea of how do we help people get past their defense mechanisms is, one, through recognition and awareness, but also utilizing creative elements like drawing. Why? Because the idea is, if, like Freud would always talk about the Freudian slip. Early on, we would work with, I would do a lot with my practicum students and interns. We worked a lot with children that were in the foster care system. And by doing that, they had to be seen so often depending on their level of severity. And there would be some kids that their severity wasn't intensified from a mental standpoint, but just from the social interaction because of where their parents are, where they weren't, and them being in foster care, but they had this to be seen. So we'd play Uno or whatever it was. And hey, how's school? Okay. Of course, being very guarded to their questions, or that they would be very guarded in their responses. And so then we get going in the game, and all of a sudden we'd ask them a question, and they respond, they're like, and so we just kind of played off and continued going on. But the dynamic of how the Freudian slip could actually be utilized can be very manipulative. And so the dynamic of what we need to do is we can take some of these tools and making sure we're not manipulating the individual to give us content to be able to reveal to us what's going on. Why? Because if they want to be guarded and remain guarded, that is their choice. I don't want to create a mechanism to pull things out of them if they're not ready. I don't want to create an uncovering mechanism to the point where they seem vulnerable, where they seem transparent in a way that they're not ready for it. I want them to be ready for that and take that step. So the dynamic of defense mechanisms, okay. But the drawing, the painting, the dancing, the movements, the music, the sand therapy that a lot of play therapists will actually utilize can actually communicate a lot. And a lot of times, what I'll do is if I'm aware of something, I'll say, you know what this picture reminds me of? It reminds me of X, Y, Z. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a response. I'm looking for a response. And in that, whether or not they want to give that to me verbally, a lot of times it's like being able to assess what they're doing non-verbally. Say, okay, I'm going to commit that to memory. And as we can continue to move forward, I may circle back around. I want to make sure I'm cultivating an atmosphere when I'm doing things that they feel comfortable, that they feel the authenticity, the sensitivity, the compassion of who God is originating in that room. Why? Because I don't want them to feel like I'm trying to take something that they're not ready to give me. And what I mean by that is them communicating something that about their story that they just don't know if they want to share. But I need to know, because I cannot help them if they don't convey what the problem is. Okay, I remember reading a book one time by Danny Silk, and it was Culture of Honor. I don't know if you read that book or not, but I remember reading this book, and it was one of the books that in ministry one time they actually assessed it. They actually gave it out to all of us within pastoral care, and we read it, and we did a retreat, and we talked about this. And I remember thinking, after reading the first chapter, I thought, ooh, and I love Denny Silk. I think he's fantastic. He was writing this chapter based upon two individuals in a situation that took place while they were in ministry school. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, oh man, shaming is going to happen. These people are going to beat them up, and if so, man, I'm not going to read this book after chapter 1. I don't. I have a feeling this is what's going to happen as I'm reading. I'm like, oh, please don't, please. And I get through chapter 1, and I'm like, bravo, from the standpoint. And he continues to ask them a question. So what's the problem? And it kind of weirds him out to the extent of like, and they start telling him the story again. He's like, oh, no, I got that. So what's the problem? What's the problem? He was well aware of the problem. Were they? Were they? To the extent of taking ownership through awareness so that they could actually work the problem. And as a result of that, try to do the best they can to clean it up without someone actually taking that from them. So in this, we want to utilize expressive arts, but from the standpoint of making sure that we're not bypassing their will. Right? Because we can use these in a very creative element, in a very informative way, but I can do some damage in the process. I want them to be engaged as we continue to use those. Community service. I think being able to serve in the community, I think, is a great idea. I think it's a beautiful idea. I think serving in church is a great idea. I think the church is a great opportunity where we can give back to the place that's given us so much, or at least that's my thought process. And as a result of that, I think the opportunity of serving does so much for our brains and for our bodies, and teaches us a lot as well. So, talk about the opportunity of giving our time, serving others, helps people get out of themselves, right? The idea of so much of the time people are so focused on themselves, which could be a dynamic of pride or maybe is pride, self-sufficiency, self-absorption, those type of things like that. So it helps them put their perspective on someone else, which is actually helpful. It helps see others in worse circumstances, not from a comparative standpoint, but from a dynamic. I remember we were watching a movie with our kiddos not too long ago, Soul Surfer. And just the idea of teaching our kids, wow, because they wanted to see it. So there were a couple scenes that we, didn't let them watch. But from that, they were like, Dad, how is this this girl going to go on with this new now normality of her body? And so we're watching, and she goes on a missions trip, and because she wanted to go back to surfing, which I thought, wow, wow. And she was struggling to be able to do the things that she could do before, but she goes on a mission trip, and I can't remember where, and she teaches this little boy kind of how to surf. She gets out there on, about waist deep, and she's helping him through the waves and stuff like that on the board, and she sees the pure joy of this little boy, and as a result of that, it helped her see, even though she was in a hard place, the devastation of where this boy was through the community and the village of what they had just experienced. I believe it was an earthquake or something of the nature. And because of that, it was able to have her be able to see this type of dynamic. And of course, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but she comes back, and now she's more determined of getting back out there and going surfing. It's good for the soul. So the dynamics of encouraging people, hey, what does it look like? Hey, tell me about your church. What does that look like, and things of that nature. Equine therapy is another dynamic. I have a good friend that does equine therapy, and horses are absolutely amazing. I grew up around horses all my life. My dad ropes, and so they are extremely innate. Extremely innate. I actually have a 11-year-old. There we go. Golden Retriever that I actually utilize for therapy in a lot of ways. Why? Because the dynamics of Golden Retrievers, they're very low energy, or at least ours is. Maybe not so much as a pup, but and so some of the times when I'm interacting with people, they may not tell me what it is that they want to communicate for whatever reason, because they don't want to share that. So I'll bring Spokane, my 11-year-old Golden Retriever, in if they like dogs. And what they'll do is the opportunity of just being there to pet, and it's amazing. Like Spokane automatically beelines over there for them, just sits right in front of them, and just sits there and lets them love on her, right? Sometimes they'll open up and share. Sometimes I'll take that information. Again, I don't want to be manipulative about bringing Spokane in, but I want to create a safe space. And a lot of times animals are a great opportunity of creating a safe places, as long as they haven't been attacked by an animal or something of that nature. But a lot of times, I'd never bring Spokane in unless I know, hey, do you like dogs? Oh, I love dogs. Okay, well, hey, just to let you know, I have a Golden Retriever that I bring her in sometimes, so let me know if that's something that you... Yes, please. Next time, will you bring her? Absolutely. Totally. No, please don't. Please don't. Allergic to dogs, or I'm scared of dogs. Okay, cool. I get that. But equine therapy, horses are very innate, and like my friend who does equine therapy out in Burleson, she told me when I got to come out and actually get to see her in action, she said horses are of course very innate, like I've said, but the idea that when someone is at odds with themselves, the horse doesn't want to really do anything with them. So the way that this therapist told me that horse, if an individual wants to beat that horse, but that individual is at one with that thought, then that horse actually will come up to him. But if that same individual is at discord of the feeling and the thought of beating that horse, but is at odds inside themselves whether or not they should do that, then the horse won't have anything to do with them. And so this therapist actually uses that tendency, that dynamic, that innateness of the horse to actually communicate some of the things that maybe we couldn't because of how it can be conveyed. Well, here's what we know about horses, that they won't, if you're at odds with yourself, they won't come anywhere near you. Well, so as we've been trying to connect with Roscoe or whoever over here, why do you think he continues to walk away from you as you get closer? I don't know. Well, here's something we know about horses, and you can convey that. So does that mean anything to you? I don't know. Well, tell me what's going on inside you right now. And so in this, we can see a lot of the complexities and all the advanced actions and skills for moving beyond stability in this chapter and how to utilize it. But again, it's that foundation of who Christ is. How did God use these things, right? Well, Brady, did God use equine therapy? Well, I don't know. Maybe from a stretch, he did ride in on a donkey. So maybe, I don't know. Okay, so, but in that, how could we see God expressing this in a way through your ministry, through your counsel, to impact individuals in a way that's going to allow them to become into awareness of what they didn't want to be aware of. How do they come into awareness for the things that they weren't aware of? And not only that, but after they're aware, what is it that they do moving forward? That is the kicker. That is the premise of what do they do? Well, I did this happened to me. Okay. And then what? Well, X, Y, and Z. Okay. Okay. 6 months ago, would you have done that? Would I have done what? The whole X, Y, Z thing. Oh no. Okay. So and what? Was that a win? But Brady, I did this. Yeah, I know. But did we take a step? Oh, the whole XYZ thing? Yeah. I guess so. See, we're moving in the right direction. We're moving in the right direction. So awareness and forward momentum. We're always wanting the total resolve, but as we're continuing to move in that direction through these actions and skills and how you could utilize them. So think about yourself in the field. For those of you that already are in the field, great. But those who are going to be in the field, for both of y'all, the idea, what does it look like utilizing some of these advanced actions that the book talks about, that I talked about? How could you use them? How could they be a benefit to you? Would you want to use them? And if so, are there certain populations that you feel like, yes, absolutely, kind of like the eye exercise? Yes, marriage context, absolutely. Any other context, I'm not sure. Or absolutely not. From these standpoints, what context could you utilize them so that they would be a benefit? So that, in essence, is chapter 7. You got chapter 8 to read on your own, and then as well as the assignment number 2. So hope you have a great week. Hope you enjoy this week, and you get caught up on all your reading and all the other work that you have planned. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance on you and give you peace throughout the week and all that you say and do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen, and have a great week. Bye-bye.